What's up, guys? Welcome to the Put Me In Coach podcast,
where we go beyond the headlines and deep dive everything NFL.
I'm Ian.
And I'm Andy.
Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much. Okay. Welcome, folks. How you guys doing? Andy, how are you?
What's happening? How are we?
We're great, man. We're great. We are starting the new chapter of this series. So the four teams that start with the word new.
Yes,
start with the
sir.
New England Patriots, a little bit in northeast action
Sure.
for the boys, and it's a weird place to be in New England, and it's a lot to cover with this team. It's very much a new look for the Patriots. I know both of us have a lot to say about this team, and it seems like it would be a boring episode, but there's so many stories within the story on this team that I think there's a lot to talk about, and I'm not sure how much of it is optimistic, but most of it is interesting, oddly. So I'm pretty fired up to get into it. What are you thinking about them?
They stink. I think they stink this year.
Yeah.
Frankly,
Yeah, I mean, they do.
if you're a diehard Patriots fan and you don't have thick skin, maybe turn this off now, because I don't think the next 35 minutes are going to be very, very fun for you. But I mean, there's pieces. There's potentially a piece at quarterback. So, it's not all bad. It's not like another new team that we're going to go over here shortly, where I think it needs to be burned down. There's at least
the burn down's already happening. The burn down's already happened. Yeah, so you're starting anew. The forest has burned down, and you've planted a couple of trees, and this whole next season is going to be about seeing if any of those things are going to grow into beautiful oaks or not. But before we get into all that, let's roll the intro. Okay, same formula as always. We're going to try to tackle last season a little bit. It was such an interesting moment in history for New England and just for all NFL fans who've kind of been paying attention to this team. I am a Tom Brady fanboy.
Sweet God and baby Jesus. And that's at rest. What the hell?
Mr. Brady, we just need a moment of your time.
What are you doing here? Who are you?
Get out of my house!
Seriously, you would call a cop? Wait, Mr. Brady, take your goddamn teddy bear with you! Holy shit, perfect spiral!
So I watched this team almost every Sunday for like 20 years. So it was such an interesting thing to kind of see the wheels fall off, but that's what happened. I mean, you started off 1-5 last year, finished 4-13, last in the AFC East. You went 8-9 in 2022, and it felt like that was kind of rock bottom for Patriots fans. But it wasn't. Last year was, right? That was the real kind of rock bottom of everything, and it really culminated, I think, with a quarterback battle between Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi, right? Like, that's sort of what last year was. It was like, who's their starter? It's like, who cares? Like, if this is where you are, it's over. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's
rough, dude.
It was a brutal watch. And the Bill Belichick era officially being over really marks such an interesting time period in my life as a football fan, because it's been such a constant, since I started watching the NFL closely as a kid to now. Bill's always been there on the sideline with the headset on every Sunday.
Yeah.
And now he's not. And
Yeah.
I think that this is such an interesting time period because, Tom Brady is gone. Tom Brady's been gone for a couple of years, but as New England fans, you've been holding on to the delusion of what you were through Bill, right? 6 Super Bowls,
Yeah.
all-timer, the head coach of all head coaches, right? He'll go down, at least for the time being, as probably the greatest ever to put a headset on. And last year the wheels fell off, I think, so aggressively, right? Nothing's better than that meme of him coming out of that woman's house with no shirt on. Like, that's sort of like what it felt like all season,
Yeah.
watching the Patriots, just like him sort of
100%.
stumbling around. We'll get into the roster. His true failure was really as a GM, not so much as a coach. But to me, being here now in this moment, before I pass it over to you, it's almost like an analogy where growing up as a Michigan football fan, we were really good when I was a little boy. And then there was this decade-long period where we were not good. And every Saturday I'd go to the games. My house was right down the street from the stadium, and I'd go all the time to the games. And you'd be watching these bad Michigan football teams lose to Ohio State, lose to Michigan State, lose to Penn State. And you'd always be sitting next to some 65-year-old Michigan alum with gray hair, and he'd be like, well, you weren't around for the Bo days. You weren't around for the Bo days. And to me, it always bothered me as a young fan because the Bo era was over. Bo had passed away. It was a new time, and we had no answers. And in some ways, New England is entering that for the first time in their football lives, where you're almost in a midlife crisis, right? You're going into the garage and putting on the Leonard Skinner crop top and the jean shorts, but they don't really fit anymore because you're 45 and you've put on weight.
Whose car is that out front?
Mine. 1970 Pontiac Firebird, the car I've always wanted, and now I have it. I rule.
Where's the Camry?
I traded it in.
And
Fully.
I think the question, before I pass it back to you is, as a fan base that's never been here before, how do you move out of what was and move into what is? Because for the last couple of years, all I've seen is what was. It's the Julian Edelman stuff. It's the Bill stuff. It's the Tom Brady roast where everyone, the Gronk. It's a lot of retirements and celebrations and strolls down memory lane, but the product on the field is horrible right now. Mm-hmm. We'll start with coaching. We're out of the Bill Belichick era. Do you feel as a bystander, sort of as an outsider, that they've made the right decision at head coach? And what are your thoughts on the coaching hires?
Terrible. A capital H hell no. I think it's a terrible hire personally. I mean, you can't spell nepotism without the NEP, right? New England Patriots. This team loves to hire from within. If it's not, Stephen Belichick being your defensive whatever the hell he was, and you have these Josh McDaniels leaving, Josh McDaniels coming back, Josh McDaniels leaving, Josh McDaniels coming back. It's been this Belichick nepotism system for literally our entire lives, seemingly, not literally, I guess I should say, but definitely for the part of online that we've been, it's been Bill Belichick calling the shots and Robert Kraft kind of just taking a back seat and saying, you know what, hey, it's working, right? And for many years, it did work, and there wasn't a lot to argue it. The problem is that, I guess to answer your initial question, like it's gonna be really hard. It's gonna be really hard for New England Patriots fans. It's gonna be hard for the coaching staff that's been there. It's gonna be hard for the administration staff that's been there. It's gonna be hard for Robert Kraft. You don't have the best quarterback of all time anymore, and you don't have the best coach of all time anymore. You have neither of those things. So much like us as Lions fans, where just last year we kind of got our first taste at like, oh, this is what winning feels like. They kind of have the opposite problem of like, this is what losing tastes like. This is what it's going to be like for quite some time, because you guys are unbelievably stuck in your own ways. It's very, very frustrating to watch. Jerod Mayo was not the right hire. You don't grab somebody from within the Belichick system. The Belichick system didn't work last year. Why would it work with a different guy leading it. That doesn't make any sense to me. How many Belichick disciples have gone on and had successful careers elsewhere?
2.
Oh wait, exactly. You know, I'm just
Like 2, I think.
I'm
I think
letting the
guys.
silence speak for. No, I'm letting the
Yeah,
silence
no, I
speak
mean, I was
for
racking
itself,
my
right?
brain.
It's
I mean,
like,
it's only been a couple of dudes, really. Let's be honest.
you know, and a lot of them have been like actual nightmares. You know, Matt Patricia was a nightmare in Detroit. Josh McDaniels was a nightmare in Las Vegas and in Denver, really, to be frank.
Yeah, Romeo Crennel.
It's just it just hasn't worked, and it to be fair, it shouldn't work. He's the GOAT for a reason. He's the greatest coach of all time for a reason. You can't just like replicate that. You can't just, you know, it just doesn't work like that. So when you go hire from within, it just frustrates me as just a fan of football, right? Like I was never a big Patriots fan, but I was a huge Tom Brady fan, obviously, from the Michigan connection. So you're always watching that. And at a certain point, as much like I said in the Chiefs video, you just have to put your own bias aside and just appreciate greatness and when it's in front of you. So for many years, I'm just watching Tom do this unbelievable run. Bill as well. Like, you're just watching to watch. And then you find yourself like rooting for him in Super Bowls, right? You're like, I mean, what do I have to lose? I want to see Tom win his 5th championship, his 6th championship. I want to, you know, you want to see these things after a certain amount of time. But the reality is that now was the time for Robert Kraft to go to the table and go, all right, the Belichick stuff is over.
It's over. Go home.
But let's let it be over. We don't need to bring in a Belichick disciple and still run a defensive team. No. We are in an offensive renaissance right now. Look at Andy Reid. Look at Kyle Shanahan. Look at Sean McVay. Look at Jim Harbaugh even. Like these guys they're all offensive minds. You have to go with an offensive mind. Shane Steichen, Dan Campbell. I mean, how many of the top 10 coaches in the league right now are defensive minds? And how many of those guys
I'd argue D'Amico, and you almost have to the OC attachment built in. You have to almost go that route now with the CEO style, or the defensive head coach style. I mean, even who comes to mind for me is attaching Ryan Grubb to Mike McDonald in Seattle. Right? You have to kind of go that route if you go defensive, right?
100%. And that's not what you did. So
no,
the problem I have is that like you had a moment where. You know, Dave Canales was out there. Ben Johnson was out there. Jim Harbaugh even was still out there. Go make one of these guys an offer they can't refuse and change the culture in New England. Give these fans something to root for. Because if it's rooting for a Belichick disciple when you don't have Tom Brady and now you don't have Bill Belichick, there's not a lot to root for. And that's just how I feel about it. It's just how I feel about it. I think it's a really bad hire, and I think it's going to be a step back for them to take 3 steps forward. You know what I mean? Like it's very like Jim Caldwell to Matt Patricia. It's like, not that. That's not what you're supposed to do. And I think this might set the team back a few years.
Well, and you wonder now, you know, when will the past be over? And it seems like the answer is, well, it turns out not when Tom leaves, not when Bill leaves, but in fact, it won't be until Bob Kraft leaves.
They can't be.
I
And
think that's what
the
we're
thing.
dealing with now, right? We're dealing with the shadow of what was. We're in the glory days. We're in the
100%.
You should have seen me in high school midlife crisis moment as a franchise. And I think you're flirting with, take it from a Michigan fan that went through this. When you live in the past, when you live in the glory, Notre Dame fans know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
It's
Chicago Bulls fans.
Chicago Bulls fans, right?
It's another one. Yeah.
It's a dangerous game of living in what was. And I'm seeing so much what was with this franchise that what's to come and what is a bit concerning. I think it's an interesting take. I think Patriots fans, let us know in the comments what you think. Are you into the hire? Are you not? Do you agree with Andy? I personally will go on the record and say I'm kind of with you. I think it was the perfect time to pivot. They kind of chose not to, and I think it was a mistake. One area that they did pivot in, obviously moving on from the Mac Jones era, I think we can officially say that draft pick, was essentially a failure. we had a really fun like pre-draft recording mock draft episode that we did right before we we first started this. Like the first thing we ever did was like a mock draft thing right before the draft a couple months ago. And you laid out this amazing plan that you thought New England should do to like build their roster. You remember that? And
Yeah, I do.
I told you, I think that is a great plan. I think that they should hire you to be their GM. But I promise you right now that Bob Kraft will absolutely not let that happen. They will take a quarterback at 2 or 3, excuse me. And that's exactly what they did. Drake Maye is a New England Patriot. Personally, I think it does provide some hope to the fan base, which is exactly why I think Mr. Kraft made that decision. And he's got all the measurables, right? Like, this is a guy who's got the size, he's got mobility, he's got the strength, definitely has NFL arm talent. Where are you on the New England Patriots quarterback situation as it stands today, going into next year?
I mean, it goes back to nepotism. You didn't bring in a new GM. You let Elliott Wolf take over, who was a guy who worked underneath Bill Belichick for the last however many years. I think it's like 4 or 5 years. He's worked directly under him in the GM department. And Bill Belichick was a bad GM. So how good could Elliott Wolf be, right? I mean, maybe he could surprise us, but if you're learning from a guy like Bill Belichick, who is notorious for being just a terrible GM, especially on the offensive side of the ball, especially in the last 5 to 6 years, I have no hope. I mean, for anybody who's curious, my plan with the New England Patriots was the best strategy was to trade out of 3, particularly with Minnesota. You knew that Minnesota loved Drake Maye, right? Let Minnesota jump up, come get Drake Maye, and you knew that's the thing. Like if you're a dog GM, if you like really have that dog in you, you know that they want this guy, right? So you go, okay, I see that you have pick 11 and I see you have pick 23. I need those 2 off rip. Really, I need your next year's first round pick, and then probably like the year after too. Maybe 26 if we'll let you have one in there between. Like, you have to get something from that. So you could walk away with potentially 3 to 4 first round picks, but instead you stayed put and you took a guy who, I know I know there's been people who's made the argument that he's better than Caleb. He was actually the number 1, or, in a year without Caleb, he's definitely the number 1. But the reality is 2 teams passed on him fully, and you ended up with the 3rd guy. And only time will tell if that was the right choice or not. But the problem I have is that, okay, you could have drafted your franchise left tackle at 11. You could have drafted another, an edge to pair with Christian Barmore for the next decade on that D line, and then you could have taken your quarterback next year. Because spoiler alert, you're going to be bad next year. So you have your own pick still. So that's probably going to be a top 2 to 3 pick, if not number 1. And then you would have had, whatever Minnesota ends up doing, which if you look at their division, if they rolled Drake Maye into that, like, I don't know, like, I don't see a rookie quarterback winning that division or even coming in second, frankly. It was probably still a 4th place spot. So you're probably picking, in the top 3 and then in the top 20, no matter what. So then you would have had your left tackle, your edge, your quarterback, and then maybe a high-end receiver or something like that. I mean, it's all coulda, shoulda, woulda at this point, but my problem is that it was really there. It was there on the table for you, and you decided to not do it. You decided to go get Drake Maye, but the problem is that you don't have any pieces around Drake Maye. I think it's a bit of revisionist history sitting here saying that Mac Jones was terrible. I watched Mac Jones be good 2 years ago because he had pieces around him. Like, granted, it was not good last year and it was not good the year before, but again, you have not put pieces around him. Who's been the receiving core? Who's been the O-line? Who's been the running backs? The dead body of Ezekiel Elliott and Rhamondre Stevenson? Like, come on, guys. That's not setting up your 20 whatever 3-4 year old quarterback for success. So what you have to do this year is you have to put out Jacoby Brissett. There's no way in hell you can play Drake Maye before week 8. There's no way in hell you can do it. I'm sorry, you can't do it. What are your pieces here? Who is his security blanket? This kid, just like you said, bro. It's like, he's got all these things to him, but how can I roll him out there and be throwing the ball to who?
Not yet.
KJ Osborne and
You can't. Not
and
yet.
Polk. I
Yeah.
mean, it's ridiculous. You know, I don't know. I don't want to like poo-poo on the Drake Maye. This is less about Drake Maye. It is more about what was potentially on the table for you as a franchise, right? Drake Maye could be special. I'm not sitting here saying that Drake Maye doesn't have special to him. You know, like just like you said. I mean, 6'4", 245 pounds. I mean, a rocket of an arm. Not scared to throw into tight windows. He's got special about him. But the problem with Drake Maye, much like what I've said in the Chargers video about Justin Herbert, he doesn't have that like kind of that elite touch and that elite feel for the pocket. He just doesn't. And so, are you able to mold that into him? Definitely. It's absolutely possible. The problem is that you can't throw him to the fire in the first 8 weeks. You have to let Jacoby Brissett do that. And Jacoby's he's been a good bridge guy. That's not the worst situation to be in, like quarterback wise. Jacoby's a solid vet. And again, no hate to Jacoby, but who are you throwing the ball to? Because seemingly it's you and me. But again, Maye coming from like the ACC, the North Carolina, like I don't love the draft history there. I don't love like, are you going to be Deshaun Watson or are you going to be Mitch Trubisky? Like, are you going to be Trevor Lawrence or are you going to be Daniel Jones? Like, I don't know. I mean, I would much rather, and none of those guys are really like world beaters. They're not like the highest of the high level, But if you can end up being Trevor Lawrence, I mean, hell, that's great. I think Trevor has a really bright future. But as we saw with Deshaun, I mean, he had all these stats and all this ability, but he couldn't win shit. And then Daniel Jones and Mitch Trubisky were busts. So I don't know. You're not taking like an SEC kid or you're not taking a Big Ten kid. You're taking an ACC kid. I think that's always a risk. And then when you add the context of, oh my God, all that was on the table, I could have gotten at the very least 3 first-round picks, and I'm still going to be bad next year. I'm still going to be bad. So I might as well kick the can down the road for one more year, let Minnesota come get their quarterback, deal with that, grab these core pieces to my team, and then move forward and see where that gets me. But you didn't do that. You did what Robert Kraft wanted you to do, which was, take a quarterback at 3, and because we're always going to be chasing Brady. And it's just, I just don't like it. I don't like it for them. I think it's going to be a rough, I mean, I go as far as saying like a rough 5 years. I don't want to like put my name out there and say rough decade, but like, it's not looking great. Your defense is older. Your offense is non-existent. Your quarterback is 21, and you brought in a defensive head coach who is a Belichick disciple. Like, this is gonna take a long time. You're gonna be at the bottom of the AFC East for a minute now. And that's really what I have on it, man. I don't know. I mean, I'll let you cook on the pieces because I don't think there are any.
Yeah. Well, I mean, touching on the Drake Maye pick briefly before we kind of segue into the rest of this this offensive unit and, these skill players, I think the good news to sort of counter what you're saying is that I think they will be picking very high again next season. So you will have an opportunity now that you've taken what you believe to be, because at the end of the day, it's all about what the front office believes. If they believe that this is their next guy, then that's what they believe. So
sure,
what they're going to do is probably be bad this year, and they'll be able to do kind of what you just laid out this following season, and kind of build the war chest around Drake Maye, so to speak, which is their plan. And that's if you
do
all
that, then all is forgiven.
Yeah, and but again, I mean, it all comes down to whether or not Drake Maye is a hit, which in the NFL with a lot of these rebuilds, that is what it comes down to. And I think the Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert comp is great. To me, that is kind of what he represents, from a physical standpoint, is those two type of guys. But, he is raw, so we'll see. I'm with you. I don't think that he should even play this season, honestly, and I hope we don't see him down the stretch, because their first 8 to 9 games are brutal. And you might start off 1-7, and I'm serious about that. Again, I mean, when you touched on, Bill Belichick's, I know I mentioned it as well, kind of inability to build a modern offense through the draft and through free agency and through all these things. I feel that there's no more, evident example of this than the skill positions. Briefly before we even get into that, I don't want to go too deep into the O-line, but I would call it slightly below league average is kind of my assessment of this O-line. It's just not great. Cole Strange was a pick that Bill took in the first round, and that's all I'm going to say about it. So the receivers to me represent kind of the pinnacle of mediocrity at the position, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, directionally, and I don't have a relationship with Bill, so I can't kind of call him and say, what were you thinking here? But what were you thinking here?
What were you thinking? I mean, thank you. I'll come again.
I look around and the same question kind of persists for me, which is, why didn't you just pay Jacoby Myers, right? Like, if this is where you were going, why didn't you just pay Jacoby Myers? Because he's kind of just a better version of all of these twos that you have in the building. Starting off with Kendrick Bourne, he's never been explosive. He's never been an elite separator. He's never had anywhere near top-end NFL wide receiver speed. But now he's 29 years old and coming off of an ACL. So that's where you're kind of beginning the story, right? You drafted Jalen Polk out of Washington. You traded back to get him. Personally, to me, he was going ahead of the draft. He was kind of a third-round guy, like kind of in that Troy Franklin territory where Denver took Troy. He wasn't a top-end second-round wide receiver to me. He wasn't anywhere near that class of, those guys like Keon Coleman and Adonai Mitchell and Ladd McConkey. I would have liked to see them get a guy, Leggett even in Carolina. Like, I would have liked to see them go get a guy if they were planning on doing the Drake Maye round 1, wide receiver round 2 thing. Instead, they traded back out of Ladd McConkey, who the Chargers got. They traded with the Chargers. Chargers draft Ladd McConkey. Then a few picks later, you grab Jalen Polk, who is a good player, but I think at his ceiling is an NFL 2 and is really more like a functional, good wide receiver. I think he's got great hands. He'll be a good addition, but he's by no means a guy. You've got Pop Douglas. New England fans know he's kind of the juice of this offense. For me, I'm a big Demario Douglas fan, but he is an undersized kind of gadget guy. He runs really good routes underneath, but he is not a contested catch guy, and he does not have the play strength and size to be a 1 in the NFL, period. He just doesn't. He is a speed gadget, very good route runner, and I think he's got a lot of potential. I don't think you can just put him in the lineup to be a 1. So that kind of leaves you with Javon Baker, who was, your 4th-round pick out of Central Florida last year. A guy I really like. He's got a lot of confidence. He's got a lot of juice, great hands, but he lacks elite speed, and he's a rookie. So you bring in KJ Osborne. I mean, to me, he's a low-end 3, high-end 4. You've got Juju Smith-Schuster in the building, and I hope that you'll allow me to skip talking about Juju at this point. I mean, we know where we are with. Can we just skip it? Right? It's like that kind of thing where it's like.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not 2017 in Pittsburgh, so I don't have anything to say about Juju. He's washed. I like that they paid Rhamondre and brought him back. I think he's a very good running back, but to me, he's not quite even in that top 10 conversation of NFL running backs. I feel similarly about Hunter Henry. You brought him back. Very good tight end, very capable tight end. It's a war chest full of capable pieces that I think are all complementary guys for a wide receiver or 2 that don't exist on your team. Does that make sense?
It totally does.
It's a group of guys that you look at and you go, all right, they got some guys. Where's my Justin Jefferson? Where's my A.J. Brown? Where's my CeeDee Lamb? Oh, we don't have that here. And you go, oh, so it's just these guys. It's just these 3s, 4s, and it's not a knock on these players. But you know what I'm saying, right? I wonder, when it comes to developing a rookie quarterback, I'm just wondering who the go-to guy on 3rd and 6, 3rd and long, in the 4th quarter one-on-one man coverage, where's the juice going to come from? Because it's not that I don't think there's pieces here, but I don't know that you have a 1 or even really a 2, to be honest. You have a couple of guys that I think could become 2s that are developmental players or rookies or sophomores. And then you have like a bunch of 3s and 4s. So I'm concerned about the offensive war chest. I'm concerned about this group. And I'm not sure how they're going to get the juice offensively, to be honest with you.
No, I'm with you. It's a rough bunch, dude.
It's a rough group, man.
It's a rough bunch. I mean, there's nothing, you said it perfectly. There's nothing. I wish I could add on to that and say, well, but they do have, who's sneaky good. It's a bunch of 2s and 3s. And
it's just a bunch of guys, and it's a bottom 5 group. In terms of skill positions, it's a bottom 5 group.
It's 32. I mean, in my opinion, it's 32. There's no, I don't see a worse group in the league.
No, me neither. But let's
to this point. I mean, we've
no,
done
I'm with
quite
you,
a lot
man.
of teams at this point. You know what I mean?
No, we have, but it's definitely on the bottom. And I mean, I think the perfect place to pivot is here, because I do think that there is a bit more brightness on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, if there's one thing
Totally
that
agree.
Bill Belichick, if Bill Belichick isn't building a solid defense, then he's no longer alive, right? It's just
No, it's facts.
Despite everything, I mean, he was always going to have some good pieces. It's not oozing with talent defense on the defensive side, which is evident by Bill's kind of inability to be a good GM and draft well, but it is a lot of good little pieces on defense. I wanted to lob it back over to you to kind of touch on the front 7.
Sure.
What are you thinking about this group, man? I mean,
I think it's
any hope?
pretty good, honestly. Yeah, there's 100% hope there. I think they're pretty good. They run a 3-3-5, 5-1 base front. It's what they've ran with Bill forever. So they don't plan on changing it. When you're looking at your edges, you have Matthew Judon. He's probably the first one you should mention. Didn't play a ton last year, had a torn bicep, so he's coming off an injury, but it's not an injury that should really affect his play style. It's more of I think with edges you worry more about leg injuries than you do like bicep injuries. They heal a little better. I think he'll be just fine. He's been your veteran leader on that defense. He's kind of been the number one. I think you could argue that Christian Barmore is the number one now, and we'll get to that in a second. But Judon's still a huge piece. He's probably the most underrated edge in the league, honestly, because you just don't really hear about him, to be frank. But he's really like that, and he does want a new contract.
What did I say for you? Tell him to bring me my money.
I feel like that's worth mentioning because there's been some like trade rumors, there's been some things, and I think it would be detrimental to lose him, especially in a year like this where you're gonna need that voice that's kind of like, hey, like if we just do this, and this, like we could win a game or two. It's like you kind of need that voice in the locker room. So losing that might be kind of like a dark pit, right? You're like, what are we doing here? You have Anthony Jennings. He's an Alabama product. He's kind of your Donta Hightower light. He kind of does a lot of the things that Donta Hightower used to do in that defense, but just not as well. You know what I mean? He's like a nasty on-ball linebacker. He can set a hard edge. He's Donta Hightower light. He's going to make some really nice plays, but not at the consistency level that you need. But he's a solid piece. It's not whatever. Then you have Josh Uche, who's a friend of the show, naturally, a Michigan product.
Yep.
He's a great pass rusher. He didn't play great last year, but I think that he particularly plays well with Judon. So with Judon out last year, schemes got changed up a little bit. He was asked to do a bit more in schemes that he wasn't familiar with or wasn't comfortable in. So his numbers kind of lacked last year, but he's still a really solid piece. He's a motor guy. He's gonna get out there. He's a great speed rusher. he's not a great run defender, but that's okay. He's not really utilized in those packages. He's normally in on the pass rush. So those are you guys you have. I think there's going to be a bounce back year for Josh Uche as well, especially if Judon stays healthy. Going to the inside, you have Christian Barmore. I mean, he's 24 years old, just got paid a boatload of money. He's kind of in that. He's not quite Dexter Lawrence. He's not quite Chris Jones, but he's kind of in that second tier. Just a freak of nature. I don't know if there's much more I need to say about him, honestly, Patriots fans. You guys know what I'm talking about. He's like that. I mean, he's an absolute force. He's a force of nature. Had a bit of a roller coaster year last year. I think to take that step into superstardom, to be on that level of Dexter Lawrence, Chris Jones, because the everything's there. It's just about putting it together week after week after week. He has a consistency to kind of disappear at moments. But he's young. Again, he's only 24. So I think he just got paid. So this will kind of determine whether he's really about it or if he's not. If he has a down year, I think maybe he was just in it for the money. And if he really, got paid and can now give his all and isn't worried about injuries in the back of his mind and not worried about this and that, he's kind of just like, all right, I got my cheese. Let's go play ball. And he takes that next step. I mean, you should expect a superstar leap from him. That's really just how good he is. You got Devin Godshaw. He's your cleanup man. He's the guy who's going to take on the double teams. He's going to open the gaps for people. You look at his stats and there's nothing there, because he's not what he doesn't translate to a stat sheet. He's just kind of your dirty, grunty, gross interior. Bring on the double team. I'm gonna take that on. You guys, shoot the gap. I'll deal with it back here. And then your rotational piece is Dietrich Wise. He's a vet. He's a dual threat. He can play outside. He can play inside. He can play pass rush. He can play run defense. He's not great at any of them, but he's not bad at any of them either. He's just kind of there, he's a solid C, right? Like he's a guy who you would give a C grade to every day of the week. And you want those guys to be your sixth man on that front seven, the 6th, 7th man who you can rotate in, rotate out. That's just what you want. So I think your front seven is a strength. I don't think it's the strength. I think the secondary is the strength of this team. But it's definitely not a weakness. You look again, you go back to the offense and we're kind of racking our brains like, what is this? What's the plan here? Where's your one? I'd argue on this front seven, you have your 1 and your 2. I think Barmo's your 1 and Judon's your 2. And those guys combined can really be elite weapons for you to kind of hang your hat on. But I think there's a secondary piece coming who might jump the ship and go to your one piece if you want to cook on that for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, as a fan of any team, you're always you know when stuff's not ideal. You know what I'm saying? Like when your team is like kind of down bad. You know it in life, you know it in relationships, you know it in friendships, you know it in football, right? And this is not a team full of great, exciting things. You have your rookie quarterback that you're excited about, and frankly, I think you've got this secondary. This unit has Bill Belichick's fingerprints all over it. It's a really good group of players, and I don't know that it's quite top 5, but if it matured into a top 5 unit by the end of the year, would I be surprised? Not really. The corners are good. Christian Gonzalez, right? I mean, we have a very small sample size with this player, but I love what I saw last year as a rookie. He was a great prospect coming out of Oregon. He's long. He's got the height. He's got the speed. He's very, very, very good in coverage. I think that if his shoulder, he got surgery on it. If he comes back from that shoulder issue the way that he went into the shoulder issue, but potentially even better with some more time under his belt, I think you've got your one. We all know what John Jones is. New England fans, you guys know what he is at this point. He's 30. That's a concern to me, but do I think he's got a couple more years left in him to be a good corner? Yes, I do. He was great last year. He didn't miss a beat, and he is absolutely, past his prime moment, but he is one of those late blooming players. There are some DBs like that are better when they're a little older, and he's one of them. I think he can be a great two at corner. And, the safeties are the safeties, man. That to me is like kind of the highlight of this team. Kyle Duggar, 109 tackles last year. Is he elite in coverage? Not really. Is he elite in run defense? Yes. This is your hybrid safety, do-it-all linebacker. And I think, having triple-digit tackles last year, I expect to see it again this year. He's not an older player, but he's not young. He's right in his prime. Very excited to see what he does, and he's very physical, and he gets downhill, and he gets after people, and he makes tackles. That is what he is. He's not going to get 10 interceptions. He's not going to get a bunch of, that's just not who he is. But he is going to neutralize your second-level running abilities. And, for me, the guy who really makes this defensive backfield really come together is friend of the show, Jabril Peppers, man. I think Jabril is the prime example of bad first impressions, souring tastes in people's mouths, and not knowing how to adjust to the new information. Jabril was an absolute superstar at Michigan. He played wide receiver, running back, kick returner, punt returner, corner, safety, linebacker. I don't know. He might have kicked the ball. I can't even remember. He did everything, and he was so good. It was always a little fakey with like the Heisman stuff, but he was a Heisman candidate at one point in his final season at Michigan. He was such a good player, so dynamic, and he got picked in the first round by Cleveland a few years ago. It didn't work, and most people's careers don't work in Cleveland.
You like it? You think Cleveland's cool? I mean, I never heard anybody say, I'm going to Cleveland on vacation. I mean, what's so good about Cleveland?
So I think seeing what he's done in New York, post-Cleveland, and now what he's done the last couple of years, particularly last year in New England, he's a very, very, very hard-hitting player. We just watched the Netflix Davante Adams, receiver show. There's a play where Jimmy G throws him a hospital ball, and Jabril Peppers comes in and knocks Davante Adams out of the game. Ball comes flying in the air, and New England intercepts it. That's the kind of stuff that he can do. He can intercept the ball. He can score touchdowns on interceptions. He's incredibly dynamic, and he's also developed into a very, very, very good, capable cover safety. So to me, this is the juice. It's Jabril Peppers. It's Christian Gonzalez. It's some of these pieces in the defensive backfield, and it's a huge light at the end of the tunnel for a team that is very much in a midlife crisis. Very much post glory, very much post Brady, post Bill, post Gronk. It's something to hang your hat on, and it's not much. I understand it's the secondary. It'd be a lot cooler if it was the receivers and the quarterback, but it is a cause for hope. It is a cause for celebration for a lot of fans that are looking for something to hang on to. So I just wanted to give Jabril Peppers specifically a shout out because he really has been kind of forgotten and a little bit disrespected the past few years because he didn't immediately live up to the hype post Michigan, and he's really developed into a hell of a safety, man. He's good. So
Totally agree.
So that's it, and that's the conversation defensively. I want to pivot to our final kind of closeout here. We talked about the offense. We talked about kind of the coaching. Like I said, I think there are a couple of things to be excited about, but not a ton this next season. Where do you got these guys, man?
Rookie coach, rookie QB. Bad offensive pieces, solid defense, but a defense that still, came in fourth last year, ended up with the third pick. I think I'm ready to plant my flag. I think this will be the worst team in the league next year. I think you'll be picking number 1 overall. I think, you picked third and you had Bill Belichick. I can't expect you to get better without him. I know he wasn't great last year, but he's still Bill Belichick, and the defense is still a Bill Belichick defense. I think you guys are going to find out that Mac Jones wasn't just the root of all your problems. I think you have a lot of problems, and I think you'll be picking number 1 next year, and that's how I feel. I think you're going to go 3-13, and I think you're going to pick first. Sorry, hate to be the bearer of bad news. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I got him. I'll give him. I think you mean 3-14 because there's 17 games now. But I got him.
That.
I got him. It's okay. We did one way for a long time, and now we're doing a new way. It's hard. I do the same thing. And 16 is just it's a crispier number.
It's a crispier number. I like I like it better.
I do too. I think the players like it better too. Frankly,
real.
I'm going to go barely more optimistic, 4-13. I think you do have a chance to win a handful of games because I think your defensive back unit can give quarterbacks fits in this league.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that will get you a couple of crafty wins on a day where maybe Rhamondre's humming or Jalen Polk has a game or Demario Douglas breaks off a couple of, crafty little touchdowns. And sure. I think you'll have a couple wins. I mean, it's hard to really fail tremendously in this league, and you do have some good pieces. But I'm with you, man. I really wish that the front office would have turned a bit more of a page and really, really gone full blown departure from the Bill era rebuild.
Yeah.
And they didn't. And I wonder what conversation we're going to be having going into next year. To me, this is going to be very much a lost season in some ways. And I think you have reason to be excited because you just drafted your franchise quarterback. But I'm just wondering how this is all going to play out with Jerod Mayo, man, because it feels like that last little clinging on to not letting go, right? It's like we still got one guy here. We brought in Teddy Bruschi, I mean, then that's not literally, but you know what I mean? It's like, fully depart from this.
Right.
I mean, he seemed like the other guy whose name was being kicked around. So it's just it's a fear. It's a fear.
Yeah, they'll be asking for Tom Brady to come coach the team by week
100%. They'll be doing the more Tom Brady appearances, and you'll see the speech where he's like doing the locker room thing, and the game ball, Tom Brady. I think there's a fear right now to let go of what was and become what is. It's a scary thing, and we've all been through it. So.
Yep.
I'm with you. 4 wins, I think, last in the division, and I think picking top 3, man. It's going to be a tough year for New England. I think it's going to be a long season.
Yep.
So that's it,
Totally
man. Patriots fans, I hope you're not mad at us. You guys won for enough. You guys won enough football for 3 lifetimes. So it just is what it is. Welcome to the mud. Please like, comment, subscribe, guys. Thank you for coming, man. And Andy, thank you for joining me, bro.
Peace
out.